Hello, everybody. It's Joy Brooks with Email and Coffee, and today we're talking with Phill Agnew across the pond. So, Phill, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, hello, I'm Phill from across the pond. I'm calling from a very nice and sunny London afternoon at the moment, which is lovely. Spring's here, and I am a marketer who has a real special interest in behavior psychology and marketing psychology. So I really love to look at the world of behavioral science, which some of your listeners may know, but if not, we can get into it, and try to understand how people make decisions and apply that understanding to marketing. I do that mainly through my podcast. So I run a show called Nudge Podcast, where I interview people a lot smarter than me, experts, authors, and pioneers from the world of behavior science and marketing psychology, and get them to explain what makes marketing great from a psychological point of view. And then I apply a lot of that work in my day job. So I work as a senior product marketer at a company called Buffer, who help small businesses grow their reach online organically through social media and through other means as well. So yeah, that's me, Joy. Thank you so much for having me on today. Really excited to talk through some of the questions that you've got for me, and yeah, I can't wait to get started.
Yeah, I love taking email marketing out of the silo and show people how it can be more forceful or just provide them with a 365, not even 365 view, because there are a number of dimensions to email marketing that most people don't even consider. These days, most people are so worried about, benchmarks and open rates and things of that nature, but they don't really apply the psychology or behavior to their audience. They're so busy about thinking about marketing. It's like, oh, we need the better subject line. But sometimes it's, we all understand, sometimes it's less is better than more. And what happens when you've got 5 seconds of your life to go through your email and you've got these incredibly well thought out subject lines, and you won't, the audience, your contact, has probably 50 emails in their box. So sometimes the concept of less is more actually just negates the subject line. It's like the brand is there in their head. So the brand name is there. Oh, I've got an email from Nordstrom's. Oh, I'm going to go shopping this weekend. They're in the email. They don't even know the subject line. And these types of things may or may not surprise people. It's something that I say, it's don't spend so much time on some things, spend a lot of time on others. And those are the types of things that I sort of want to talk to you about. The behavior of the consumer, or adversely of the business to business, because they're different. They're totally different. And some businesses are both consumer and B2B, right? Direct to consumer, but they also may do wholesale. So they may have two different streams going out. And they may not even realize that, or they may realize that, but they're not necessarily speaking correctly. So let's talk a little bit about something that I recently saw that you mentioned, the spark effect, CTAs, things of that nature. How to think through an email at the higher level.
Yeah, definitely. I think the spark effect is an interesting one. And I might even just take a step back from that to sort of explain how we could get to the spark effect in the first place. So the spark effect is a principle which a lot of UX designers and growth psychologists apply to their email marketing, but other things as well. And those principles all come from trying to understand how and why people make the decisions they do. So as marketers, often we lean on advice from experts. We lean on our gut feeling. That's a classic thing in marketing. So what do we feel like doing today? And let's go and do that. We obviously lean on textbooks and a bit of marketing wisdom, but that's a very new thing, really. Like marketing textbooks and marketing courses, that marketing hasn't been around for very long. So there's not a huge amount of resource to base your decisions on as a marketer. And this always frustrated me as a marketer because I was really envious of other disciplines like surgeons and doctors and lawyers who had this wealth of experience and knowledge that they could pull from to make sure to guarantee that they were doing a good job time and time again. As a marketer, I don't think we often have that. But one of the areas that we can lean on to become more consistent with our decision making as marketers, to get more consistent results, I feel, is behavior psychology and behavioral science. And the reason I think it's so important is because we have spent hundreds of years trying to understand how the brain works. We've spent hundreds of years figuring out why people make the decisions they do. There is a really robust field of evidence which explains how people make decisions. And it's repeatable and it's proven and it's peer reviewed and it's available to marketers to lean on. And so I think if we start applying some of these principles to marketing, we'll get better results. And so the spark effect, which you mentioned, Joy, is a classic example of this. The spark effect is the idea, is the principle that a small change is easier to accomplish than a bigger change. Now, like with most behavioral science, a lot of this just sounds really simple, right? If you ask somebody to do a small thing, they'll be more likely to complete it than a big thing. And this actually comes back from a study which was conducted in the States. And in the study, what the researchers were trying to do was to get people to do a fairly major thing. They wanted people to erect these really large billboard signs on their lawns in the States, which had a big drive safety poster. Now, that is not an easy thing to convince somebody to do because their lawns is their lawns and they want their house to look nice. They don't want it to be a big advertisement. In fact, they barely put anything on their lawn other than maybe a few political posters. And even so, that's not the majority of people. And so they had two approaches. For one group of houses, they sent the researchers in and they said, can you put this billboard in your lawn? We really want to increase drive safety in the area. Would you be all right to put it up? If we do, we think it will really help. And in that scenario, a very small percentage of people agreed. I don't have the exact numbers, definitely can look it up and share with you after, but it's in the region of 1, 2, 3% of people. Unsurprisingly, right? Nobody wants to go and erect this large billboard. For the other scenario, they tried something different. They used the spark effect, this idea that we're able to do smaller actions first. And so instead of saying, can you put up this big billboard? They said, can you put this small drive safe sticker in your window, in your porch window, in your doorway? And to this, like 50% of people said yes. Straight away, they were like, yeah, of course, yeah, no problem, of course I will. I really want people to drive safer around the area, so I'll do anything to help. And then they waited 2 weeks. And so that shows, by the way, that the spark effect works. Smaller things far more likely to get people to action. There's an interesting follow-up as they waited 2 weeks and they went back to the houses that had already agreed to put up a small sticker. And they said, hey, you agreed to put up the sticker. We really want to ramp up our efforts in the area. Would you mind putting the billboard up? And now a much higher percentage, and a much higher raw volume of people agreed to put the billboard up. It was somewhere in the realm of 15%, which was greater than the people that would be just convinced to do it when they were asked first time around. And so as marketers, this is really interesting, right? Because we often have this feeling that we should be converting. Email marketers feel this a lot. We need to get people to sales. We need to convert them as soon as possible. Every email should be a chance for someone to buy. Every email should be a promotion. It should be a chance for somebody to buy my product. And what this study suggests is that constantly asking for the big thing, the purchase, can actually be worse than maybe trying to utilize the spark effect and trying to ask for smaller things first. And so I think the spark effect reveals why a sort of longer drip campaign can work. Why getting people to read your blog first or sign up to your webinar, or perhaps just do a call with your salesperson, leads them up to making a much bigger decision. If you're going to buy a multi-million-pound deal, you're never going to do that on a website. You need to be led up to that decision, and that's all down to the psychology of the spark effect. And so as an email marketer, I think it's a really important one to remember. I think in email marketing, we have this wonderful opportunity where we can actually schedule and plan a workflow of emails that go out over a period of time where the levels of asks, where the asks get higher and higher with each sequence, with each round of the sequences they go out. And I think we can utilize this idea that if we get somebody to agree to something small to begin with, we can convince them later on. This is a classic of business approach. It's seen in freemium. It's seen in sort of how you tier people up in terms of their Patreon subscribers if you're a creator, or in terms of just product purchases, in terms of a business. And I think it's a really important one for email marketers to be aware of.
I agree. You know, it segues into loyalty, where, you know, if I've given you my email address, that begins the relationship. So I don't sign up for everything. I sign up for things that I'm interested in. And there's obviously, I'm showing you that I'm loyal. I'm giving you something of mine. I'm giving you a bit of my privacy. So, I mean, I won't give my email address on Facebook, but I'm giving it to a company that I know nothing about other than their brand and their product or their service. So that relationship that begins with me giving them my email address, they need, you know, the term nurture didn't come out of nowhere. They need to nurture that, and doing it in small bits, thought out, planned as such, not the big ass goal at first. And perhaps, you know, like you said, it was interesting that they did the small thing and then they got the big thing. So brands need to think about that. Not necessarily go for the big sale, but begin to get the consumer or the business aligned with the brand in some way, shape, and form before they, you know, go for the big ask. Now, you know, it may not necessarily apply to direct to consumer, but it does in a way. You don't always have to offer the coupon. You don't, because the perception would be, hey, you know, if they're going to always give me a coupon, you know, I'm just going to wait for the big coupon. You know, it's Pavlovian. You wait. You know, they're going to drool now. Just wait for the coupon, and it's difficult because a lot of companies do that. They'll start with coupons to get people to sign up, and they'll find that the only time they sell is when they offer the promotion. It's difficult. You know, if your profit margin is such that you could do that, okay. But now you've got yourself in a pattern where you're going to have to offer that, and it becomes somewhat of a problem. And your content is basically driven by promotion. But there are other ways of managing content, and that brings us to another interesting term, which is radical differentiation and counterintuitive thinking. So instead of saying, oh, well, you know, we'll give them a coupon and they'll buy, you know, it's more along the lines, what is everyone else doing? Maybe we don't want to do what everyone else is doing. Maybe our product stands out. That's why we're here to start off with. Don't we have a mission? Aren't we different? Isn't our service or our product or what we do different? How do we set that up in motion? And for example, a company that I'm a patron of, Black Rifle Coffee in the United States. Now, we all know it's email and coffee, so therefore I'm going to talk about coffee, but they sell coffee, but their angle is they give back to the community. And they give back to veterans and police and that sector of business. And that's their differentiation. They're Keurig, they sell Keurig pods, they sell coffee. What's so different? You know, coffee, everybody drinks coffee. But their angle's that, and it's specifically that. And all of their content is driven on that. And perhaps there will be people that are not interested because, you know, perhaps of their stand, but that's their that's where they come from, that's their brand, and that's how they feel they want to be different. And I feel it works. You know, the coffee is good too, so.
That helps.
So, do you want to talk about, you know, how, you know, the thought process that goes into, you know, not being like everyone else and not doing mainstream content and not, but, you know, thinking through basic concepts, but using, you know, radical differentiation.
This is really hard. This is really hard. And every marketer who has ever tried to come up with an email subject line will know that this is really hard. Because differentiation sounds so easy. You know, it sounds like, oh, let's just do something different from what our competition is doing, and that'll work. And it's never quite that simple. In fact, it isn't that simple. And arguably, that's not how it works at all. There's probably a line between differentiation and distinctiveness, which is important. Black Rifle Coffee might not be that different in terms of what they do, but they're distinct in your mind because of the way they've gone about their business. So I think it's, again, useful to take a step back and understand what differentiation is in the first place and why it's important. And really the evidence for this goes all the way back, I think, way back to 1933 with Hedwig von Restorff, and she was a researcher in Berlin in Germany. And she ran these really interesting studies way back, almost 100 years ago now, which looked at how distinct items, different items were more memorable and more likely to be recalled. So in her study, she would give participants this big piece of paper with a lot of combinations of different letters. None of them spelt words, they were just different letters muddled up, maybe 4 or 5 letters, space, and then another 4 or 5 letters, space, and another 4 or 5 letters. And the goal was for people to read that list for 30 minutes, and then afterwards try and write down how many combinations they could remember. It's a really hard task, and I wouldn't want to do it without definitely a fair amount of coffee beforehand. But within this piece of paper that she created, this list of letters, she included one set of numbers. So a set of numbers, so you would have A, W, X, B, G, and then you would have 1, 7, 2, 4, 5, or whatever it might be. And what she was looking to see is if the numbers were more memorable than the letters, because they were distinct, because they stood out, because they were different. And lo and behold, they are. They're around 30 times more memorable. She repeated the experiment again. This time it was all numbers, but within the list of numbers, there was one list of mixed up letters. And in that scenario, the letters were more memorable. So it's nothing to do with numbers or letters. It's simply to do with being distinct and standing out. And this applies to brands, this applies to modern day marketing. It's a study which is almost 100 years old, but it applies today. And there's a brilliant behavior scientist, Richard Shotton, who analyzed this in his book, The Choice Factory. This is a variation of the von Restorff effect, and he did it using brands. So he gave people a list of brands to remember, except the brands were all from one category. So let's say the automotive category. So you'd have BMW, Volkswagen, Volvo, Skoda, Nissan, Fiat, whatever it might be. And you had to remember as many of those brands as possible. But within that list of brands, you would put one brand from a different category. So Burger King from the fast food category. And here, again, being different, being distinct, made you more likely to be remembered. So in this scenario, you were 4 times more likely to be remembered if you were Burger King in that scenario. And again, he repeated it where it was all fast food brands and then put an automotive brand in, and the automotive brand was more likely to be remembered. So there's something here, right? Brands that are distinct within the category they're being analyzed stand out. But what's really interesting, and I think this applies to email marketing in general, is as marketers, we tend, despite knowing this about differentiation and distinctiveness, we tend to copy competitors. So in the UK sports industry, and football specifically, but I'm sure this is the same in the States, you have all the same brands sponsoring the major sports teams. So all of the major cups and teams in the UK are sponsored by beer brands like Heineken, Carlsberg, Budweiser, and Carling. All of the football, and I should say soccer for the American listeners, but the soccer shirts in the UK, I think more than 50% of them are sponsored by gambling firms. So gambling firms, which obviously in the UK is legal, they're hugely take up the majority here. And again, we've got to think about this with the distinctiveness hat on, because actually what we know is that brands that are in a category which, or visible in a place where other competitors are just less distinct and less likely to stand out. This applies to SaaS websites. If you go onto the website of, major popular SaaS tech tools, things like Airtable, Zendesk, Asana, they all tend to have a really similar website. Block of title, mini block of text, 2 buttons, usually some sort of cartoon animation with a little bit of your dashboard of your screen. We all tend to copy competitors. And my all-time favorite example of this comes from the watch industry. If you look at the watch industry, you'll see that watch ads tend to be very similar. They tend to include a celebrity like Brad Pitt or Daniel Craig or whoever it might be. They tend to be holding or wearing a watch, looking out. This is like glossy magazine ads, if you can imagine. So all very similar, but in fact, they're so likely to copy competitors that they not only have very similar ads, they set the time on the watch to the exact same time. So every single watch ad you see, the time more than likely will be set to 10 minutes past 10. And hey, I'm not saying that if you set your clock to 5:30, you'll be distinct and you'll stand out, but this shows us just a chronic lack of distinctiveness in marketing and a chronic underappreciation of the von Restorff effect. Because what happens when you do stand out, when you try and be distinct, is that you'll be more likely to be sort of remembered and to be memorable. Now, how does this apply in marketing? Well, you've got examples you've shared already, like the Black Rifle Coffee, where they've taken a slightly different approach. They've changed their marketing setup, or their business setup to support charitable needs, which makes them distinct and stand out in the customer's mind. And when you're thinking about your range of coffee shops, you've got one which is slightly different there and distinct in your mind. But there are other examples as well. As one great example from the UK, which I'll share, which some of your UK listeners might know, but if you're from the States, you might not. And in the UK, about 10 years ago, we had this influx of websites that were created online to compare different utility brands. So you could go onto these websites, put in your address, and you'd be able to compare all of the different energy, gas, water suppliers in your area, internet suppliers, and figure out what would be best for your home. I'm sure you've got some very similar examples in the UK. And when this market first started out, all of the competitors tended to use the same marketing message. And this marketing message was the textbook message that you'd read about if you took a marketing course today. They spoke about the benefits. They said, we'll help you find cheap utilities for your home. They spoke about speed. So they said, we could do it fast, get you set up faster than anyone else. And they spoke about, I think, stuff like support as well. So, we've got people on hand to make it as easy as possible for you. And all these companies were spending billions on TV ads, radio ads, billboard ads, all to say the exact same thing. And what this meant is there wasn't much distinctiveness until one company realized that the market was sort of saturated with all these similar themes. This was a company called comparethemarket.com. So their actual term, their website, even sounded similar to the actual category they're in. It's just called comparethemarket.com. And so to stand out, they came up with something really interesting. They created an ad campaign around a meerkat who, in the ad campaign, complained about the fact that the meerkat's website, so the meerkat owns a website, it's a very smart meerkat. The meerkat has a website called comparethemeerkat.com, where people go and compare meerkats. And he's in the ad and he's saying, this site, comparethemarket.com, is ridiculous. They're stealing all my SEO. People are going to their site to look at meerkats, and they should be coming to mine. And I'm really angry and I'm upset about it. And this is like a funny ad, of course, like there's a bit of a joke behind it. But what it really was distinct. It was very different from the competitors. And it stood out because whilst all the competitors were saying we're cheaper, we're faster, we're better, they were saying, here's a meerkat complaining about his website and how it's not SEO optimized anymore. And yeah, no textbook would tell you to create a meerkat complaining about a website which has nothing to do with your own. And yet this campaign increased awareness for the brand by 83%. They achieved their 12-month objectives in 9 weeks. And even today, they are still the #1 market leader in the category after not being up until when this ad was released. This ad was released 10 years ago. They're still using it today. That is the sign of a successful ad. But what's hilarious about this is, and your UK listeners will know this, is as soon as they did that meerkat advert, all the competitors copied them. Suddenly they all went from talking about how good they were, how better they were, how fast they were, to having opera singers singing about their company, to having men dressed up as Beyonce dancing around the streets talking about their company. All these different examples, they all copied them and tried to be just different in their own manner. But it wasn't the fact that this company, Compare the Market, was different that made them stand out. It was the fact they were distinct. They were first, and it stuck in people's minds, which was the sort of power of distinctiveness. Now, I'm sure there are lots of ways to apply this to email marketing, but I think I'll leave it at that, because I think that's something for you, Joy, for experts to talk about. But that's the science behind how distinctiveness works and how it can be applied.
Yeah, that story reminds me of in the States, the insurance commercials with Geico, the gecko, and then Liberty came out with the emu.
Yeah.
So you've got Liberty
Exact same thing.
with the emu, and you've got and it's almost as if they want you to compare, because it's it's smack in your face. Leave it at that.
I don't think it's that. I don't think they want you to compare. I just think marketing is a really tough job. Going into a boardroom and saying we need to create an advert of a meerkat complaining about, or an emu, or a gecko, that's terrifying. And these are people, their livelihoods depend on these jobs. It is really hard to go and suggest something distinct. It is really easy to say, hey, look, our competitor has just tried this thing with a meerkat or a gecko. Let's do something similar with an emu. It's much easier to do that. It's much easier to copy than to be distinct. Yet copying, as we can see from the stats, will only lead you to failure. It will not get you recall. It will not get you. It won't help you leverage this distinctiveness, and it's probably the most risky thing you can do. So as marketers, we have to become brave. We have to educate people about the von Westphal effect and the power of distinctiveness. Otherwise, we'll forever be chasing competitors.
There was a time when clients would come and say, when we would ask, do you have a particular layout for your email? And they'd say, oh, we love the way Apple does it. And everybody wanted that white background with the product, but they didn't have the product photographs. It's like Apple spends all this time on their product photo, and you're basically just showing me some, half-baked teeny image. No, it's not. We can't make that work. So think it through. Yeah, we could do a layout with Apple, but you're going to have to do those product shots. Oh. So there's also something else that I want to talk about. Positioning. So you've got your product or your services, and there may be a demographic, there may be a location, there may be any number of reasons why your product works, for whom it works. And sometimes people may misjudge that. For example, oh, our product is for, it's a vanity product, it's for women. They think it is, and then it launches, and they don't look at the demographics. They don't realize men are buying this for women, but men are buying this. So maybe you ought to, appeal to men who are buying this for their women. In any case, positioning as a strategy, and how to think this through, because it's very strong. A lot of people don't, sometimes it comes out of ego. It's like, well, the boss wants us to do this. Okay. And you could fight all you like, and it ends up swirling back to what the boss wants you to do. And, it is what it is. Sometimes it is all about ego, and sometimes that's, sometimes it's throwing it against the wall also. That's the strategy. But let's talk a little bit about positioning the brand, the service, the product, and how to think that through for content.
Again, not an easy thing for marketers to do. And unfortunately, I think a lot of marketers make a crucial mistake, which I'll explain in a bit. For positioning, I follow April Dunford's approach to positioning. And April Dunford's approach, she talks about it a lot in her book, obviously awesome. But one of the main, tenors, or one of the main sort of points that she gets across is, if you try and be everyone everything for everyone, you'll fail. Positioning is not the game of let's try and be Apple, like you said, or let's try and appeal to the largest number of people. It is complete opposite. It is let's be specific about how we help a specific group of consumers for whom our product uniquely helps. And again, there's science behind why this works. So there's a principle called the sort of paradox of choice. And this was really discovered by Inga back in 2000. She ran a study, which I'll explain. The study hasn't been replicated particularly well, but the sort of principle behind the paradox of choice is pretty firm and definitely is there. And in Inga's study, she set up these stalls in supermarkets in America, grocery stores in America. And on alternate weekends, Inga would be selling jam in these stalls, little jam capsules. And on some weekends, she would sell 24 varieties of jam. So you had all these different types of jam. You had chili jam, you had strawberry jam, you had raspberry jam, you had jam that I can't even think of because it's different from that. All these different types of variety, organic, cheap, whatever it might be. And then on the alternate weekend, she only had 6 varieties of jam. So a much smaller amount. You go from 24 to 6. Now, marketing wisdom, the marketing textbooks, the marketing courses that we all take, would pretty much tell us that there is only going to be one winner in this fight. The stall with 24 varieties of jam, it should win. Why? Because there's more options. And if there's more options, it's easier for consumers to find the jam that they want. I can go in, I can find my chili jam, I can find my strawberry jam or my chocolate favorite jam or whatever it might be. The 6 variety jam shouldn't work because you might not have your option there, which means you're less likely to buy. And yet the results showed that the complete opposite was true. So when Inga sold 24 varieties of jam, only 3% of customers bought, whereas when she sold 6 varieties of jam, 30% of customers bought. So a 10x increase. And again, this study has not replicated that well, so the increase may be overemphasized, but the choice paradox is there. When you offer too many options, people get turned away. And this applies to positioning. And I think it applies to positioning in this sense. If you as a company try and offer or try and make yourself available for everyone, try and target mums, dads, men, women, boyfriends, girlfriends, kids, adults. I mean, nobody would be silly enough to do that other than maybe a mammoth like Coca-Cola. When you try and be everyone for everyone, especially everything for everyone, especially when you're a small company trying to grow, you'll just suffer from this paradox of choice. You won't stand out. You won't gain any distinctiveness. And it's really important to focus your product, your service, or your offering right down to be something specific for someone individually. And so for me, there's an example that I love. So I work in tech, and I'm constantly looking at how tech firms advertise themselves. So I'm looking at sites like Twitter, I'm looking at sites like LinkedIn, I'm looking at all of these smaller sites as well. And there's one company which I think does a brilliant job of positioning, and the company is called Loom. Now what Loom do is they allow you to record short 5-minute videos of yourself using your camera like this, and then also record your screen. Once that recording is done, they upload it to their own servers. They give you a link which you can share with somebody else. It's a really quick way to make a video message for someone, but it's a video recording platform. And let's be honest, it's not a new thing. We're on one right now, which is very well known. Yeah, so Loom had to be specific. They had to target someone specific. They could have just gone with the general approach, the textbook approach, which would have said, let's showcase how we're a really great video servicing platform. If they did, they would have said, we're an amazing video platform. And they would have talked about all the benefits, like we allow you to store X amount of footage, 50 gigabytes worth of footage. We allow you to record in HD. We allow you to watch your calls back at 2 times the speed. We allow you to do an unlimited amount of calls each month or videos each month. They could have done that traditional approach, but they would have been not taking this advice around positioning, which is focus on being something specifically for someone. So instead, their messaging is very different. Their messaging is, why have a meeting when you can have a Loom? It's an anti-meeting product. The whole product is positioned and sold in a way where they're saying you can spend less time in meetings and less time writing emails. Instead, just do a Loom. Gone are the messages about how many megabytes or gigabytes you have. Gone are the messages about whether you can record in HD or standard definition. They are there somewhere. If you scroll and get past the main messaging, you'll get there. But unlike other tools like WebEx, Zoom to some extent, whatever other tools you use to record yourself, they're not front and present. Instead, Loom have said, no, let's focus and let's use positioning to come up with something unique in the marketplace. And that's what they did. They said, why have a meeting when you can do a Loom? And for me, that's positioning action well. It's focusing down on how you can help a specific group of people and finding a message that resonates with those group of people. This won't work for people who aren't in lots of meetings, but it will work for a lot of others, and it'll be more effective than the traditional approach.
It's quite an ingenious way to brand a product during the pandemic, when everybody was saying, if I go to another Zoom meeting, I'm going to shoot myself. Because everybody, families were meeting on Zoom, and all the, everybody was meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it is ingenious, and that pivot, that's really the way business works. And if you can find a product, the point is, you find a product that is distinctive. That's what you're doing, hopefully, and then you market it on that distinctive strategy. Don't push it out to everybody. This is what we do. Sometimes it works. I'm not saying it always works. Sometimes it doesn't. In this case, I think it was fairly ingenious. I think
it's ingenious. Just one more thing there, Joy. It's ingenious because I would argue the product is not unique. I would argue the product is not distinct.
Right.
I would say there's 100 other competitors like that. But Loom have got market share through their marketing. They've gone against the textbook. Instead of saying about, oh, how great they are, and how quick they are, and how fast they are, and how cheap they are, they say don't have another meeting.
They actually came up with another way to communicate, with an alternate method that is very, that at this point in time, everybody doesn't have the time to meet, or is tired of meeting, or doesn't feel that they're getting anything out of the meeting, being 1 in 15 in a virtual meeting. So they're saying, here's a different concept. Use this concept. How about this? So they have. I'm telling you now I'm selling Zoom. Zoom can do the same thing. Part of Email and Coffee in the first rev and evolution of my thinking was just sit in front of the camera and talk for 5 minutes. And I thought to myself, oh God, I just can't do that, because I'll go off for an hour and a half, and that's not the point. So I canned that concept immediately, because I didn't think I'd be able to shut up after 5 minutes. But they're basically, the point is, the positioning is, right now everybody's tired of the 45-minute meeting. Let's see what let's create something new, and they did. So it's fairly, it's not, it's not rocket science, but it's rocket science in a way. But the last thing I wanted to talk about was in a marketing department. You've got all these creative people. You've got the designer, you've got the writer, you got all these creative folks. And then you've got the one person that's sitting back and saying, yeah, but what about behavior? And nobody wants to listen. Like, as I said at the beginning, the behavior is, I'm very busy. I've got 50 emails in my inbox. I've got probably 5 minutes to go through them all to find the ones that are important. That's the behavior. And everybody else is going, oh, let's make it blue, let's make it red, let's make it beautiful, let's, and I've got only a certain amount of time. So there's this behavioral science behind, concept behind everything that we do, because we're human beings. We have experiences, we wrap them up, we begin habits and behaviors, and then we've got this creative thing on the other side where the department is coming up with, creative briefs and spending hours and hours and hours on projects and campaigns versus behavioral science, what people actually do, the experience and the habits that we have. So can we talk about that versus like how to bring them together, how to get the creatives to understand and actually create along the lines of behavioral science? Because we're not saying don't create, we're not saying that. We're saying think about how people act and then create on that.
Yeah. Hey, again, it's a tough one. And I think there's an important side of this, which is it's really important to love the thing you create and to feel ownership of the thing you're bringing to market. You know, if a designer is feeling indebted and is very concerned about the color and the look and the feel, that's a good thing. We'll all have been to websites or read emails or just been to shops or looked at products where you can see that the person who's serving it or creating it isn't truly engaged in what they're doing. And so having that engagement is really important. But the other thing I would encourage these teams to do, and obviously I would encourage them to look at the world of behavior science and marketing psychology for every other reason I talked through today, but to test it too. Like, you're not going to be able to convince a team, and it's not just designers, the boss is the easier one to explain here, of like, you're not going to be able to convince your boss to use a meerkat or to an emu or whatever it might be, just because you've said so, or you've read a book, or you've watched a Zoom recording of Joy and Phill chat for a while. You're going to be able to convince them through testing. So it's really important, and this is, again, another real benefit of email marketing, is the number of tests you can run and the statistical significance you can get. It's really important to run these tests because for me, that is one of the most and easiest, the fastest and easiest ways to convince other people on your team about a specific approach. And the testing has to have a purpose behind it. And I'll give an example of a test that I think is a brilliant encapsulation of the company testing lots of different things to figure out what would be best. And it's an example from a book called Behavioral Business by Richard Chataway. And in the book, he talks about KFC Australia. Now, KFC are owned by Yum Yum Brands. Yum Yum Brands in total spend billions of dollars on marketing, literally billions. You know, that's more than the GDP of some countries. So they have a lot of marketing expertise. They have a lot of designers who care. They have a lot of managers who care. They have a lot of copywriters who care. And they have some of the most creative people in the world working for them. And so when they decided that they wanted to run it, well, let's take a step back. In KFC Australia, they decided that they wanted to offer a deal to the people of Australia. They wanted to offer a really simple deal, chips for $1. Pretty good deal. $1 is, you know, that's pretty cheap for Australia, and getting chips for $1 is a pretty good deal. Now, they could have just said, designers, copywriters, marketers, come up with whatever you think is best, and we'll just pick number one and go with that. But they didn't. They care about trying to find a solution that works. They care about finding the best offer. And so they ran a test, a massive test, using Facebook ads. They tested over 90 different messages. Now, these messages had such a variety of different messages that they were choosing from. So obviously they're written by these really smart copywriters. So you had stuff like from Perth to Adelaide, their loved country, wide, chips for $1, or stuff like the Colonel's never been so generous, chips for $1, fresh, hot, straight out the oven, chips for $1, all these different, you know, bits of copy. And then they would put them all into Facebook ads and see who converted the most based on the ad. And what I love about this example is, well, the results are a huge endorsement for behavioral science, because despite all of these wonderful creative bits of copy that folks wrote, the number one result, by some way, the number one post that generated the highest amount of engagement, converts, customers, was a simple behavioral science nudge. It said, chips for $1, limited at 4 per customer. Now, that's scarcity, by the way, you'll know that one. That's a classic nudge. People are attracted towards scarce resources. But what's amazing about that is it's also so uncreative in a way. It's literally just the offer and then a limit on the offer. Sure, it's an artificial limit, but you can create a limit like that. It's very common for companies to create limits on how much you can order to shift behavior. And in this scenario, it is the number one most effective marketing campaign that they could have run and that they did run for this offer. And just to go back to your original point, well, how do you convince the designers, your boss? That's how you run a test like that. Again, you would never be able to go to KFC and say, oh, you know what, I think chips for $1, but limit it to 4 per customers. Don't let people buy more than 4. I think that'll work. You get kicked out of the room. You'll get laughed at. You'll get demoted. You get fired. You say, no, what are you talking about? What if someone wants to buy 5? Are we chucking away money? So running these tests, leveraging behavior science, understanding why people make the decisions they do, learning things like scarcity and how it has an effect on what we buy, and then running a test to prove it is the best way to go about it, because otherwise convincing people is too difficult without the raw numbers and the data. So this approach is the right one.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't like FOMO. So I usually when promotions end, somebody will, say, okay, let's subject line is last chance, this offer ends tomorrow or tonight. The point is it works. And it angers me every time because it works. It clearly works. There's no doubt about it. It works. I just plead with people not to abuse it. Don't end a sale and then, what popular, backed by popular demand. Don't do that. No, to start off with, because you're playing with, you're playing with fire. Now, basically, you're lying to your audience. They're going to figure that out. You do that a few times, they're going to know. But FOMO works.
Yeah, and I think linking it to something genuine, linking it to a part of the product is really important. So with the 4 per customer for KFC, you're implying, hopefully, and I think KFC should do this, that these chips are difficult to make, that you can't just go and make more than 4 per customer because they cook them fresh every time. They're freshly made, so you can't order that many.
Yeah.
You could apply that at a coffee shop. You could apply that in lots of different scenarios. There are more lateral ways to apply scarcity than offer ending tomorrow, next day, offer starting again. And one of the best examples of this is movie posters. Movie posters have the best opportunity for scarcity, and I haven't seen a single one do it. Every single movie poster you see, every single trailer you see will say, coming to cinemas, date, 22nd of May, coming to cinemas, 30th of August, whatever it might be. There's no scarcity there. If they said, coming or available now in cinemas, last screening, 22nd of May, that will encourage people to go. This is actually proven. Richard Shotton, who I mentioned earlier, he got 2 groups of people and said, hey, there's a movie on this weekend. It came to screen on the 22nd of May. Will you go watch it? And to the other group of people, he said, hey, there's a movie on this weekend. Came to screen 22nd of May. It's ending this weekend. Will you go watch it? People were 36% more likely to say yes, 36% more likely to go. So there are lots of lateral ways to apply scarcity. As an email marketer, please don't just think it's starting an offer, ending an offer, and just doing that on repeat for no good reason. Apply it to your product if you can, showcase it, benefit by the scarcity, and think of more lateral ways to apply it.
Yeah, it's difficult for the email marketer to consider the supply chain, but again, take your email marketing out of the silo. It's not just about the email process. Unfortunately, marketing is somewhat siloed. How many times I've recommended to people, if you really want to find about your product and services, walk into your customer service department, have a chat with them, really. And everybody's like, oh yeah, but they never do it. They never do it. And if anybody knows about the product and services, it would be customer service. Worst case is customer service people are so beaten down that they don't even care. But they are the first line. They're the ones who know more about the product than anybody else. They're the ones that, you could basically sit down in a room with coffee and say, how can we better our product? Because they're going to come up with 15 ways to Sunday because they've heard them on the phone, through email, every single time they get an interaction with a customer, they're hearing how to make the product better. Because every customer has some opinion. Your product's great, but this is what I would do. I'd make more variety. The packaging it drives me crazy. The customer service knows all this, but again, it's difficult to take email marketing out of the silo, marketing out of the silo. It's something that I fought, and I've been in marketing for over 20 years. It's not just the event, it's all the pieces that build up to the event. And the marketer needs to know that piece, because that's how they're going to make a better event. Well, Phill, speaking of events, this one is about to end. I thank you so much for being.
Thanks, Joy.
Yeah, I really, this is a different look at email marketing, and it's very refreshing to me. How can people find out more about you on the web?
Yeah, listen to the podcast. If you've enjoyed today, hopefully you'll enjoy my podcast as well. It's called Nudge, Marketing Science Simplified. Search for that wherever you listen to podcasts and you'll find it. You can go to nudgepodcast.com as well, and on there you'll be able to sign up to my mailing list and get a tip like this or a tip like these in your inbox every week. And also you can follow me on LinkedIn or on Twitter. Connect with me on LinkedIn or follow me on Twitter, and I share marketing tips almost every day, so you can get some more tips like this straight on your feed, on your inbox, or wherever you listen. But I limit the amount of listeners by 4 listens per podcast. I'm joking. I haven't found a good way to use scarcity yet. I have to think of that.
I'll be sure to post your resources at the bottom of this YouTube, or people can also, I'll be sharing this on LinkedIn, so I'll also share that with folks then. So thanks so much for coming on the show, Phill, and happy email marketing, y'all.